Um,
There we are.
there we go.
So tell me about what's been happening. It's been like incredible stuff that I read about, and Larry has told me a little bit about his teachers working with you.
Yeah, it's been nice. Larry has, I don't know how many people are part of his district, so I'm not sure what percentage, but there's a large chunk. Maybe it's the elementary folks who have all registered for Story Workshop Studio. And they've been really active in the meetings that we have and the postings. And so that's been great. It's been fun to have a group that's working together join in.
I'm anxious to speak with them because I think that I have to figure out how I can make connections to what I'm going to be doing with them, which at this point I'm not sure about what I'm going to be doing with them and what they're doing with you. I think I don't know if you told me it was the first grade teachers or the first grade and the second grade teachers, or if all of the teachers are doing this. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I mean, the music teacher, I think it's all of them in there. And I don't know how big the district is. I get the sense that it's kind of small.
One elementary school, one middle school, one high school.
Yeah. So it must be all the elementary school and then some administrators. So that's exciting. It means that they're engaged in some really interesting, maybe processes of change or asking new questions or something. And everybody seems eager to jump in, and that's not always the case, as you know. So
what's the biggest change that you notice teachers making?
Tell us more about your question, Renee. What do you mean?
Well, I mean, like everybody, well, not everybody always makes a change, but I, like when you notice changes happening, or you hear people talking about changes that they're making, what are the ones that really stand out to you? What kinds of changes are standing out to you?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's different categories, right? Like some are having to do with materials. So just finding ways for children to have more access to materials to explore during, things like choice time, but also starting to recognize that when children play with things, they're usually telling stories too. And then the idea that those stories are, a really powerful place to start more traditional literacy instruction from. It's a good, meaningful point. And then I think there's another category that has more to do with, it's related, but I think it's from the perspective of just trying to recognize the relationship between the adult and the children, and trying to pay more attention to who the children really are, what they're saying, what their questions might be, what they care about. And I think a lot of those conversations are coming from motivated by sort of the present moment, the context that we're living in, and this, strong intention to not go back to normal, but also a real sort of, that's a good idea. And then what does it look like, or what does it mean? Because nobody's in agreement about that, of course, because we haven't really invented it yet. So that's another kind of conversation, I think. And they're related, obviously, but they're
right.
different.
Right.
I think that there's something strong in terms of it's a very big bucket, but a shift in what kinds of interactions they value and are paying attention to. And those interactions are both with the children that they work with and between the children that they work with, but also with the adults that they work with, right? It's shifting from feeling like the questions that they ask are ones that they have certain answers to. The questions that they are asked are ones that they're supposed to supply certain answers to, towards getting really interested in pursuing questions and understanding questions with each other, right? So I guess it's from certainty towards curiosity.
Mhm.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that's hard for teachers. If they, especially, like if they've been doing it one way for a long time, it's almost like, it's not the same, but it's like trying to get teachers to understand that saying good job is not the place to go. It's not meant in a negative way when teachers say that, but it just has been such a habit for so long that it's a difficult habit to break. And so this is a bigger kind of habit to break, of thinking about what the nature of a question is, and
Mhm.
why would we want to ask questions of children, and why would they want to ask questions of us? What's the reasons for it? And
Mhm.
that's, I think that's a big thing. One thing that, I've never been there, but I've seen videos of Angie play.
Mhm.
I'm totally fascinated with that. That's my latest fascination. If I could go to China, I'd go there and really see that. But one of the things that I've been able to take from it when I work in schools with teachers is a way of, um, really listening in, having teachers really not intrude so much and listen in more to what children are talking about and saying, and to only kind of step in when the possibility is to help them move forward a little bit, but to record, to do a lot of recording, and then to what I saw them do in the Angie play, and it really works great, is to take like a snippet of a recording of what, children, like a group of children were doing, say during
Mhm.
choice time or during outdoor play. In my case, it's usually during choice time, and when they get together to project it, and to
Mhm.
ask those children to come up, the children who are involved with it, to come up and stand there and talk about what's taking place, and to have invite the other children to make comments, to ask questions about it. So I'm finding it's getting a lot of conversation going, and a lot of thought-provoking conversation going. And so I was really glad that I saw that, because I didn't do that before as much. I did it a little bit after I went to Reggio,
Mhm.
but not in the same way. Not in the same way. So I find that interesting.
Yeah, well, and the other thing they do too is ask the children to write and draw about what they just were doing on the playground, right? And then share those things too. And
Right.
so it really is, it's story workshop esque.
Well, this isn't really story workshop, but in one school in particular where I've been working, and I'm actually going to go back this next
Mhm.
month to work there again. That's another one of my anxiety things. Is that the principal, who's very lovely man, but he's so anxious about, like, are they getting all the literacy they need? Is, all the time that they're, like, when I went there to work there, I said, look, um, they must have like a good stretch of time for choice time, and it's got to be in a prime time during the day, not stuck at the end of the day. It has to be when they're really alert and really prime. And the teachers have to have time to take the children out to play, not
Mhm.
just when they go out to play after lunch to play with their, and there's a school aide watching them. Teacher has to be outside with them, because that's a whole different dynamic, watching children out on the schoolyard.
That's right.
And I said, if you don't feel like you can commit to that, I really don't think you should hire me. I don't think that I'm going to be able to do the work that you want me to do. And to his credit, he hired me. But then like 2 years went by, and he came in one day, came to me and he said, really afraid that the kindergarten children are losing too much of their literacy time. You know,
Yeah.
I mean, he was afraid. He was afraid of that. And so I thought about it, and I just did not want him to take any of this away. And so I spoke with the kindergarten teachers, and I said, I have an idea. I want to run it past you. What about if you saved 10 minutes after choice time and for children to have reflection journals and for them to write in their reflection journals about anything having to do what they did the last hour.
Mhm.
And of course, at the beginning of the year, it could be drawing pictures, and then they start writing, more. And see, he's okay.
Good.
uh, and, and they, so they loved the idea. They said,
Mhm.
let's try it. I asked the principal of what he thought, and oh, he really loved it. And he bought those composition books where half of the pages for pictures and half the
Mhm.
pages for writing. He bought it for all the children in the 5 kindergarten classes. And what happened was the kids loved that time. They absolutely love it. And if something happens like there's an assembly and they can't do it, they get angry, they groan about it. Um, the teacher generally does not do conferring during that time. She might walk
Mhm.
around, she might be encouraging. The kids can go walk around the room looking for things. They can go back to where they were working during choice time. They help each other, etc. And then they usually have some kind of a share, at the end of it. There's one video clip I have where Fanny, this teacher, is actually helping a little boy who just recently came from China. She's
Mhm.
helping him a bit, but so it's not really story workshop, but it somehow relates.
Kind of is. Yeah. I mean, I think that, children want to write. They really do. And so just finding a way for them to be invited to do that
Mhm.
when, right up close to something that they really care about because it's social or, creative or just makes sense because everybody's right there and they know they want to share. They want to share and see, did you see what I saw? Or, like all of us do. And so, so that makes sense. And yeah, I mean, I think that is story workshop, really.
I guess so. What some of the teachers did tell me was that there are children who really dislike writers' workshop.
Hmm.
They are incredibly unhappy in writers' workshop, and yet they love journal time. They love it.
And that's where all the good questions are, right? Is if that's true,
Mhm.
then what do I make? What should I be making of that?
Mhm.
Right? What's the message there? And what, as a teacher, what could I do differently? What can I do about it? Because opening, it's most of the time it's just not being able to get that window open for people so that they can believe that children want to write and that they can enjoy it and it's meaningful to them. But once we can see that, then it seems like we've created a situation for ourselves that
Right, right.
we
I
can
mean,
make some other changes.
yeah, I mean, unfortunately, like say in this school, and I'm sure it's in so many schools in New York City in any case, uh,
Mhm.
they're so tied to this teachers college type of reading workshop, writing workshop, and the teachers they have these uh, studies they do, genre studies, and everybody
Mhm.
has to be writing about this at this time, and everybody has to be writing about this at such and such a time, and they have um, um, different benchmarks, and and I mean, I do remember. I remember when I was teaching kindergarten, and we didn't have that. We were working. My PS 321 was a really always a big teachers college, big connection, but it wasn't always what it is now. All right. And so when I was teaching kindergarten and we did writing workshop, it was just fun. It was
Mhm.
fun. It was total fun. There were no, everybody's writing this, everybody's writing that. I would listen to the children, and based on what I heard, that's what I would be talking about before they went off to write. It was a lot of fun. And then little by little, it started to change. And I remember one particular time when when the change really, I felt so upset. So my kids, they were writing wonderful stories. They were writing really wonderful stories about also make believe, real things, everything,
Mhm.
And then we had a staff developer who came, like I won't even say the name, but a pretty like high up in there, staff developer, and who was going to do list books with us. And what are list books about? List books are getting these 5-year-olds to start writing words. That's
Right.
what it's about, is getting them to write words. And I was so upset because I worked so hard to make sure that I had a environment where children were being expressive and writing things and sharing things. And now all of a sudden, this is an apple. My apple is red. This is a banana. My banana is yellow. Something like that. And I was very upset. And to me, that was like the start of all of this. And that was pretty close to when I retired. So I didn't have to do too much of that. But I found that upsetting, and I know that they're still doing stuff like that. And I don't see the reason. I don't understand it. I mean, I taught kindergarten and first grade. So I had kindergarten, went to first grade for so many years. And everybody, just about everybody. I mean, there were some kids who struggled more than others, for various reasons, but they all wrote and they all read. And,
Yeah.
I think that we can have the mentality that literacy is something that we do to children. And I guess we could say the same thing about choice time, and we can say the same thing about play. We do play to children, or we do choice time to children. But if instead we start thinking about, why do children play? Why do children make choices? Why do children write and read? And then we can start finding that there's some intersection between that and our values of what we want to have people experiencing in school.
right.
And then we can find connections that go in there. And I think that's what makes Story Workshop. And I think that that's what makes the kinds of experiences that you're describing. It's recognizing children actually do have something that they bring forward, that they are eager to bring forward, that they're using to make sense of the world, and that's something that we don't have to make them do. That's something that they are driven towards and just need the right conditions that will support that.
Right.
That shifts everything. But when it's about the bell schedule, when it's about the number of minutes, when it's about these kind of organizing principles and making children do something, then it really shifts our perspective of how this all works, and it leads to very different decisions.
Yeah. Next door to me, I have a deck out in the back, and then my neighbor has a deck there, and they have a 8-year-old daughter. She just turned 9. I don't know, she was 8 this summer. And then there is another family living next to them that has 2 children, a little boy who is, I think, 7, and the girl is 5, just turned 5. And they opened the gate. They cut out part of their fence in between so the kids can run back and forth and play with each other. And so they spent a lot of time playing up on the deck, and I just loved listening in to them playing, because they were 3 different ages, actually, and yet their play was so rich. I mean, it was so amazingly rich. And one time they were playing, and they decided to make a movie of something, and they were making up a script, and they were, I mean, nobody was imposing anything on them. They were just doing that, and we 2 weeks ago we had a block party, right, to sort of celebrate the end, like that we can all get out together and have a block party. And the three of them were making signs to put up on the street that there was going to be a block party. And the little one, Adi, she held up a picture to me, and she said, "I made a picture for the block party." She said, but there's no words on it except Mom, Dad, Luke, and Adi. She said, "Do you think people will understand what I mean?" I have a feeling that picture is going to tell them. It was very funny. But just the play was just so, it was just their play, and I think that once kids get into school, a lot of times, then they're no longer trusted to do that.
Well, we forget, like, I think that we don't enough have a conversation about whether we're situating ourselves to draw things out of children that we know they've experienced, we know they wonder about, that they have feelings about, that they're, passing judgment on, everything that comes into their perceptual field. Or are we basically assuming that our job is to put into children, transmit information, give them content knowledge, and if we don't really consider from which, kind of place we're standing to begin with, then we are. We're just not talking about it. And so that's how you can end up with a writer's workshop that's still about putting in instead of drawing out, when the original intention of a writer's workshop was to draw out, was to give children a platform in which they can say what they want to say and find out what they mean, but because they've shared it with other people. And so it's I just think that we operate based on an assumption of a transmission model continually, and mostly because we don't have enough conversation about how much rich resource and ideas and concerns and cares live inside every single, human, whether they're
Right.
2 or 10 or whatever.
And what a lovely example your neighbor offered you of what we as adults might offer in that spot, because she's saying, I think you might have some insight into the reader that I don't have.
Right.
Do you think that somebody, when they look at that, do you think they're going to understand what I'm going at here? And if we take that question really seriously, then I think the next question is, of course, well, what are you hoping to communicate? What are you hoping that they get from that?
Right.
And how do you, here's what I got from this. How do you think you can add some of those layers in there? And what approaches might you take to do that, right? Like that's such a great example of why we can't have this orthodoxy of I will not interrupt the children's play, because there is a real role for you there. And that child knows a role for you. They know that you can offer something that they don't have yet, because you've been on this earth a little bit longer than they have. And so they can ask you a different question than they can ask the child sitting next to them.
Right. Yeah. So I want to ask you, Lynn, since I brought up these reflection journals, and we're talking about the school in Florida, New York, Larry School. I wish it had a different name in Florida.
It can be confusing.
There's some district in New York, Florida, also waiting to work.
I tell people I'm going to Florida, New York, just get Florida, and they say, no, don't go there now.
Right.
But if how would you feel like these teachers are part of your story workshop? How would you feel if I brought up the idea of these reflection journals? Would it I don't want to undermine anything that you're doing with them.
No, I think that's great. I mean, I think it's important to, and part of it's because I don't want to fall into, I don't want to inadvertently reinforce the idea that there's a program that can be implemented that we call story workshop, and rather continue to tell the story that story workshop itself is born from a process of research, born from a question that could have taken a lot of different forms. It happened to take the form that I describe in the book, and that still represents what I know best about story workshop. But I don't believe, Matt and I don't believe that it is something that can be replicated. And I think it's something that will only, the children and our work as teachers will only benefit when those kinds of questions get asked. What happens if I add this reflection journal after the children are playing? What do I notice about what they write about or what they care about? What new conversations get stirred up because they're sharing little things that happened in their choice time, or that I didn't notice happened, or there's a new connection made or whatever. And I think that I just think that those are the questions we need to be asking, so that we can stay as close as possible to our own particular work with these, particular children at this particular time.
Right.
I think it's probably helpful to crack open, like even just the way that you framed that question. I think it's important for us to call out like what Story Workshop Studio is intended to be.
Okay.
Is that it's a space for people to come together, and we've got people really all around the world. I mean, every continent has a number of people represented from it, and lots of different countries, and then in all of these different places, very different schools serving very different populations, right? So it's there's a freedom in that diversity that lifts things a little bit. And so that they can come together and say, hey, I was at this session the other day with Renee Dinnerstein, and Renee challenged me to think about this thing. And I care about that because it's connected to these beliefs and values that I hold and these experiences that I've had in the past. And so I tried this out, and here's what these children that I was working with did. And I have some hunches about that, but I'm real curious to know, like, what do you see here, right? That's the kind of conversation that we're hoping to have happen, and that it never ends with, well, I'm going to do this because Renee told me to, or because Susan told me to, or because Matt told me to,
right?
Because that kind of obedience and compliance is not. It's counter to everything that we're trying to encourage folks to do in their work with children. So how can they do that in their work with other adults? We want inspiration to happen, not kind of rule following.
I mean, it is funny to think, we could line up choice time and story workshop and all of Matt and Kathy's good work and Ariel's good work and Christy Mraz and, all these folks who are, and, Teachers College and all these folks who are doing all this really important work, and think about, well, how we could spend maybe 20 minutes on each or something. But that's so not the point, right? But to offer this work, this full body of work to teachers so that they can make their own sense of it in their own space with their own children. And hopefully, the more teachers can stand in that kind of space of intellectualism and creativity and professionalism, the more opportunities they'll have to do that. Because I mean, that was certainly my experience, is the more that I, worked very outwardly on asking those kinds of questions. How do these all make sense? And what does it have to do with me and these children right now? The more space I was given to do that, because it's compelling when you see a teacher and a group of children and a group of families working together to make meaning of what's happening in the world right now, and the level of engagement, and you know, what everybody wants school to look like starts to look like like that. And so I just think we'll see more of it if we can help more teachers realize that.
Yeah, I want to say what Susan just said again, because we are seeing some of that, like some examples of
Yeah,
that.
we are.
If I think, well, Tuesday mornings from 8 until 8:40, I'm going to do Renee Dinnerstein choice time. And then from 8:45 to 9:30, I'm going to do Christy Mraz play workshop. And then from 9:35 till 10:15, I'm going to do Susan MacKay story workshop, right? Like there's the question for the teacher is, well, what patterns do you see across all of those different structures? And how do they seem to line up with the culture and context that you have created in your school and your classroom, and that you're tilting towards in your school and your classroom, you're aspiring towards?
I mean, this is where, right, Renee, you and I met each other on that trip to Reggio,
Right.
whenever that was, so long ago. And that was at that kind of question was at the heart of that tour, right? Is what does all of this this literacy research have to do with the Reggio approach? And so we're going to come together and look for patterns. And you know, that's what started Opal School, was a question
What
of
is literacy in any
implications.
case, right? What is it? You know,
Right. And just what are the implications here for my work and me and my families that I work with? And, you know, and those are the kinds of questions I think teachers need to be asking.
right?
Because that's where all those ideas emerged,
Mhm.
right? Everything that you have to offer as a mentor, as a pedagogical companion to Florida, New York, or to anywhere in the world, comes out of your experiences, right? Your research and your experiences of working with children. And we certainly don't want that to be the end of new ideas, right? Like that's something to offer other folks so that they can turn to their setting and see what you know, what does this mean here?
Yeah.
You know, one of the things about so I retired from being a classroom teacher in 2000. I retired from the Department of Ed in 2003. Right. And then in 2003 is when I started doing consulting work. And one of the things that's happened as working as a consultant and going into schools in New York and outside of New York is that I keep thinking, oh, why didn't I do that? I want to go back to my classroom and try something out, you know, because it is always something new. There's always something interesting that somebody's doing that you can think about and all that. Another thing I was thinking about is the children coming back this year. And this whole, I mean, this could be a whole discussion, but this whole concept of, you know, that lost all that they've lost. But basically, you know, children must have so many stories that they're coming in with. I mean, what an amazing year and a half they've had.
Yeah.
Whether it's horrible things that have happened, whether it's things that are confusing, whether it's wonderful time that they got to spend with their family that they didn't have before. Something. Things have happened to children, and they have so much to process and share and build upon. You know, I mean, it bothers me when I hear this this whole concept of lost time,
And they,
making
yeah,
up. You know?
they always do, right? They always have so much. But this is such an opportunity. This moment is such an opportunity because it's so amplified. I think that the diversity of experiences is so amplified, and the emotion is really amplified. And so that's a great recipe for inviting, you know, exchange. And so it would seem that it would be a really ripe moment to ask some of those questions about, you know, what happens when I invite children to tell me what's going on, and make that the source of literacy instruction, or, you know, any number of things.
Right. We have,
And what might these children have to offer us as adults that might help us understand a little bit better what we've gone through over these last 18 months?
absolutely. That's interesting. I didn't think of it that way, but you're right. Yeah, definitely.
I think that there's something interesting in the way that you posed that question in terms of shared experience, right? Like when we're all together in a classroom, we have certain shared experiences over a course of a year that over that course of the year we can increasingly rely on, right? Like that we can make new sense of because we've all lived this thing together. And over the last year and a half, we've all lived something together very separately, right? So there's a different challenge for the teacher in trying to draw together some kind of sense of commonality and connection than there normally is. But maybe it just helps us, like so many things with this pandemic, maybe it just helps us recognize that we were relying on an over sense of commonality beforehand, right? And that it just pushes us a little bit further to be a little bit more sensitive to understanding the differences that lie inside there and the incredible resource that those differences offer.
Right. Yeah, no, you're right. I think we have an interesting challenge ahead of us. Very interesting. I'll put it that way. And it's also, I think that it's a difficult time for teachers in that. I guess the approach is different all around the country or wherever, but I know, for example, in the school in the city that I work with, the children can't play together. They're not letting them play together. They are sitting at tables 3 feet apart. 5-year-olds are sitting at tables, and they have bins of things that they can play with. But that's not what we're talking about when we talk. Play is social. So it's a big challenge, and I think we're going to have to figure something out because kids can't sit this way all year. They can't sit 3 feet apart from each other, and so something will have to happen.
And yet, how many schools were set up prior to the pandemic to make sure that people stayed apart from each other? How many schools were set up prior to the pandemic to create all sorts of obstacles to social construction? And so, we can say that that's the problem, but I don't know.
I just sometimes I get the feeling that that this frantic idea of learning loss that feels that there's some freneticism about that around that. It has to do with somebody's going to figure out that there's no such thing. And so people that profit off of these programs that keep kids in, first grade, second grade, third grade are at risk of becoming less relevant because it's going to become more obvious that children didn't need those things to begin with, or that we've jumped the track somehow. And so all of that, those things that everybody sort of took for granted are now at risk. And at least that's happening, I guess. That's not bad news.
We shall see what happens. I'm hoping for the best,
Yeah.
I don't know. I just read something online about New York City and a person who is being considered for the next school chancellor. And every time there's a new chancellor, I go, oh, no, what's going to happen? But I read some of the things that he said, and they're very interesting, about how, judging, we can't judge children by a standardized test. I have not heard anybody in authority in New York City say that for a long time.
Yeah.
So things like that. So maybe there will be changes here. We'll see.
It's interesting, right? Because standardized test movement came out of many different drivers, but one of them was folks recognizing that their children were not being served well by schools as they existed, and that perhaps standardized tests would be some kind of check on white supremacy.
Mm-hmm.
And we can disagree with that solution, and recognize that it doesn't seem to check white supremacy much along the way, but there is something interesting there in terms of right now what you're describing with your anxiety about walking into schools and how schools can be damaging to your health in a much clearer way than they ever were before. Turns out schools have been damaging to a lot of people's health for a long time.
Yeah.
Right. And so how can we help this, moment become a moment of reconciliation and reconstitution towards creating schools to be more healthful centers?
Right. I also hope that what we're talking about is something that is embraced not only in like private schools or upper middle class schools, which I think, when you look at it, there's more of that, more embracing of this way of thinking there. And it has to be like this way of looking at children has to go all across all children, and I think that is a challenge. That is a big challenge. And we'll see.
Yeah.
Anyway, this was really great talk. I'd love to speak to you after I have my time up in Florida, New York.
Yeah, it'd be fun to hear what you see.
A quick chat or even an email or some way of kind of sharing. For me, this is like a big deal, like going out after a year and a half,
Yeah.
going out into the world. I go little by little to different things, I went to a movie, an outdoor movie.
I haven't done that yet. So
Well, this was outdoors at Lincoln Center. So it was not going inside the theater.
Yeah.
Anyway, it was really terrific to talk to you.
Yeah, you too.
And I'm looking forward to like actually working with a school that's also working with you, so I can I'll learn from them also. Okay.
It's great to have an opportunity to all work together. I appreciate that too.
So stay well and
You too.
keep doing your work because it's really super important. Okay.
Thanks, Renee. You too.